Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware. Today we're taking a look at the used price to performance market, especially in how it was affected by the Ryzen 3000 series launch and what we can expect to see moving forward. So let's jump right into talking about some of these used parts and just where the value is. So before we talk about just what has happened, let's backtrack a little bit to the predictions that I and several others made in the lead up to the Ryzen 3000 series launch. One of the big predictions made was that early generation Ryzen chips, especially first generation, but even some second generation chips, would be hitting the used market in larger and larger numbers, which of course would drive down prices for things like Ryzen 5 1600s, and to some extent that has happened. Looking at sold prices on eBay, the Ryzen 5 1600 is definitely going off for a cheaper cost than it was a month ago. About a month ago you could get it for $105, $110. It looks like a lot of the ones sold in July have been sold for even cheaper than that. So right now it looks like the Ryzen 5 1600 is a really good value on the used market. It's already a good value on the new market even, because Ryzen 3000 series chips only went down to the 3600, at least on the Zen 2 architecture, APUs aside. So at the $110 or $115 mark, the Ryzen 5 1600 is already a really solid value because it still packs 6 cores and 12 threads. It's still not gonna bottleneck you, at least with most mid to lower end graphics cards at 1080p gaming. Now, if you're going for high refresh rate 1080p gaming with a really powerful GPU, then yeah, you might want to look elsewhere beyond the 1600. But for most people, the 1600 is gonna give you just fine 1080p performance, and really even 1440p performance should be just fine if you're willing to go for 1440p. And also, you're just not going to have some of the frame time issues on a 1600 that you might see in modern games on some of the older Intel systems that are only quad cores especially. So right now, if you're trying to pick out individual parts, the Ryzen 5 1600 did in fact meet expectations. It is slowly falling in price. It is probably the best value CPU out there right now. Both if you're looking on the used market, you're getting 6 cores and 12 threads, and even on the new market, there's really nothing out there from Team Blue that can match the 6 cores and 12 threads at $110 to $115. So right now, if you're looking for individual parts and you're just piecing together a system, the Ryzen 5 1600 to me is about where your build should start and often end, unless your budget is just a little bit higher. But that's all well and fine. That's assuming that you're building a new system. What about if you're upgrading an older system? And that's where this box here, this prop box, this i7 4770K box comes in. And yeah, we're actually seeing a really solid effect on Intel used parts as well, especially in the Haswell generations and older, where you can't go beyond quad core 8 thread parts like the 4770K. We have seen in the last few months really, but especially in the last month, the 4770K and its brother 4790K have come down a little bit in price. In fact, if you're still rocking a Haswell i5, this upgrade path is not prohibitively expensive. It's not beyond the point where it could even be recommended. It's okay. You can get these for about $120, $130 now. Obviously, the Ryzen 5 1600 is still significantly cheaper, but by the time you upgrade your RAM and get a new motherboard, the i7, which is still a very capable 1080p gaming chip, may be the option to go for if you're looking to upgrade. Now, if you're building brand new, absolutely do not go for the i7 4770K or really any of the Haswell i7s, because again, individually, they're just not representing a very good value, especially when considering that you can always upgrade from the 1600 later on down the road to a Ryzen 3000 series chip. If you hop on the i7 4770K's platform, that's pretty much the end of the line. So to this point, we've talked about buying individual parts, whether that's to upgrade a system or to build a completely new system or new to you system, using the used and new markets, but basically buying everything individually. The one place that the Ryzen 3000 launch didn't really impact was the used pre-built market, which is still the best value representation if you're trying to get up and running at solid frame rates at 1080p gaming. And the best way to do that I can find still, at least if you aren't really willing to explore local deals or anything like that, you just want something that you can go and click buy on, is actually to head over to eBay still and head over to the Dell Optiplexes, because you can still get those third generation i5s paired with 8 or even sometimes 16 gigabytes of of DDR3 RAM for around $100, $120, depending on how much RAM is in there. Now you still have to add storage and you still have to add a GPU. So humor me for a second and let's pretend we went with the 16GB option on this particular Optiplex I pulled up. So we're around $120. You can get a used RX 480. Now, yes, it's very likely this was used to mine during the crypto boom, but it's a risk you take. But you can get an RX 480 4GB card for about $80 to $90, depending on the day. Sometimes you may even pay closer to $100. So let's say worst case scenario, we're at $220. Add in a 1TB hard drive, again, depending on the deal, depending on used or new, probably looking around $30 or $35 at worst. So really what we're looking at is around $250 to $275-ish after you get a system up and running with 16GB of DDR3 RAM, a very capable GPU, and realistically an i5 3000 series chip. While it may struggle with some frame timing issues in the most modern games, for most games, especially and including esports games, that i5 is going to run just fine around 60 FPS. You may have to tweak settings here or there depending on your GPU, but the only downside to this setup is you may have to get an adapter to fit into your 8-pin or 6-pin depending on which card you get. PCIe power plug there, but a lot of these Dell Optiplexes come with power supplies that have enough power overhead. You can in fact adapt them to something like an RX 480 and not fry your system. So it's a great option as buying pre-builts to get up and running for as cheap as possible, because even with an $80 CPU for the Ryzen 5 1600s, you're still gonna need a motherboard and you're still gonna need RAM, and by the time you get both of those things in place, you're looking at least $150 for just the base platform, and that's before we talk power supplies, cases, storage, GPUs, anything else. So the cheapest way to get up and running with PC gaming has not particularly been affected by the Ryzen 3000 series launch, and in fact, it's still a route that I would recommend for a lot of people that are trying to get into PC gaming on around a console budget. But if you are trying to part together a system or if you are upgrading a system, then right now, I'm sorry, but Team Blue is kind of out of the game. It's really down to which Ryzen chip you want to pick up, because the 1600s are a great value. The 1700s are a great value right now. You can get Ryzen 5 2600s for really solid values, both new and used right now. The Ryzen 3000 launch has just generally been extremely disruptive. And I'm not even talking about Beyond Haswell for the Intel systems, because Beyond Haswell, so Skylake and on, those chips are still extremely overpriced compared to the AMD counterparts, which at this point are really starting to benefit, especially in the gaming market, from game developers optimizing games for lots of cores, lots of threads. Because if you remember, Skylake and Kaby Lake were still stuck on 4 cores and 8 threads at the top end of those stacks. And yet from the get-go, the Ryzen 1000 series had mid-tier parts with 6 cores and 12 threads, out-coring and out-threading the Skylake and Kaby Lake Intel parts. So if you're looking to even to upgrade or get brand new or used, really you shouldn't even be looking at Skylake or Kaby Lake, even if you're already on those platforms, just because those i7 chips on those platforms are still way overpriced for what you're getting out of them. So that's been the disruption that I've seen so far. I expect some of these trends to continue, especially with the price drops of the Ryzen 1 and 2000 series parts. I expect some of the older Intel parts to continue to drop in pricing. At some point, I would expect Skylake and Kaby Lake systems to also start to fall down. But those are the trends right now, less than a month out from the Ryzen 3000 launch. But I want to know from you guys, especially if you're somebody that has put together a system since the Ryzen 3000 launch, what exactly did you put in your system? Did you go with the brand new Ryzen 3000, or did you go with used price to performance goodness? What was your picks? Let us know down below. And of course, if you liked the video, hey, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are super helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos around me from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.